Well, my name is Don Peterson, and my father was Marvin Peterson. He was president of the Crescent Tool Company. And in that position, relative to Justice Jackson, Justice Jackson was my father's lawyer, both personal lawyer as well as the Crescent Tool lawyer. I only know probably two stories that come from my father. Story number one is that I remember being home one time and Dad came in. He said, "I can't believe this." He says, "Here I am just chatting with Justice Jackson, and the president calls up, and here we are in Jamestown, and the president is calling one of my friends, Justice Jackson, and the president says, 'How are you?' And Justice Jackson would say, 'Hello, Mr. President.' And Dad couldn't believe he was in the same room as somebody talking to the president so directly."
Now this would have been in the house?
This would have been in the Jamestown offices.
Okay.
And probably the more important recollection is the story, very coincidentally, Greg Peterson bought the house that we used to live in Lakewood, 4 Winchester Avenue, and the story there is that Justice Jackson would visit our home from time to time, although I never saw him personally. But he slept in a room where I used to sleep at 4 Winchester Road, where Greg now owns, the house that Greg owns. And I remember Dad bragging about, "Do you realize who slept in this room? Justice Jackson slept in this room." Of course, at the time, that didn't mean much to me now, but it does then, but it means a lot to me now. And so I passed this story on to Greg, who apparently enjoys Justice Jackson's company in that particular room.
How long did your dad own the house at 4 Winchester? Do you know the time period?
Oh, the time period was about from 47 to maybe 66.
So the time period...
There's about a 20-year time period.
So when the logical sequence Jackson, who was on the court during that time period, so you've been in the Supreme Court, would have been coming probably up from Washington, spending some time in the area. Spending some time in the area. Then he had a lot of friends in the area, as I understand it. But my father, of course, knew him quite well personally. And I think he wrote my father's original will, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Now, from your father's will, actually some foundations have been created from his father, the Carl Peterson, right?
Yes, the Carl Peterson Foundation.
And was there a separate foundation as well? 2 foundations, the Carl Peterson Foundation?
Well, it started out as the Carl Peterson Foundation, and then as the families, of course, got bigger, the Carl Peterson Foundation was split up. One by the name of Don Morell, which includes myself, the Don, and my 2 sisters, and the other one kept the name Carl Peterson. And both of those are still in effect. The Carl Peterson is now part of the Jamestown Community Foundation. And
yours is down in...
And down, well, I guess you might call it Tucson, but it just kind of follows the families around, and we well, it's still in effect, but we're now thinking of splitting that foundation up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Now, Justice Robert Jackson was not the only important public servant to stay in that room, which was formerly your room. As your wife also was a public servant of renown.
Well, my wife, Shirley Peterson, was the first woman commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, and she served under President Bush. And through that, we got to know Justice O'Connor quite well, and I've played golf with her. Oh, not a lot, maybe 20 times. I don't know if that's a lot or not. Mm-hmm. And Justice O'Connor speaks, I think she came up here to dedicate But Justice Jackson was very important in her life as well.
I wrote her a letter this past year, knowing she was coming to Chautauqua, reminding her that she, of course, dedicated a statue back in 1996 to Jackson, and giving her credit for the renaissance of interest in our community on Jackson, and inviting her to come down for a private tour of the Jackson Center, which I hope she will do.
I'm sure she will.
Come sort of a private tour, you know, I'll pick her up. And I've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with her when she's up here. So yeah, you're right, she is a fan of Jackson's and just a generally wonderful person.
She is also a fan of Chautauqua. She said her favorite place is Chautauqua, New York. Her favorite place to visit. And of course, she's been traveling all over the world.
How did your paths cross with Bodie Craighill? While we're talking about it, before Shirley comes up.
Well, we knew Bodie and Mary in Washington, D.C. Again, very, very coincidentally, and didn't know them well, but they belonged to Chevy Chase Club, and we also belonged to Chevy Chase Club. And they had Thursday night dances, black tie, everybody dresses up like that. And Bodie was a dancer, I'll tell you. He was a very good dancer, and my wife said he's the best dancer she's ever danced with. And I said, what? And she said, well, you come in a close second. And I think she meant a far second. But they were a great couple. Mary she was a very private person. And Bodie, I understand, just passed away a little while ago. And we haven't seen him in a long, long time.
And Mary passed away in 1999.
That I did not know.
And her 3 children are active in the Jackson Center. Tom Loftus, Bob Loftus, and Julia Craighill. And Julia continues her mother's interest in ballet and things dance related.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, Mary was a great dancer. And she was professional. But Bodie was a lot of fun. Good man.
Now, about your family, your mom and dad, your dad's background is what? Marvin was...
Well, Marvin Peterson took over the Crescent Tool Company. My grandfather actually started Carl Peterson started the Crescent Tool Company way back in the early 1900s. He got a patent on the Crescent wrench, the adjustable wrench, 1907, and was president up through his death, 1933. My father took over and ran it till about 1963, then sold it out to the Niagara Share Corporation, who turned around and sold it to the Cooper Industries.
Where's your dad from? Is he from Jamestown? Jamestown boy?
Oh, yes. Yeah, he was born and raised in Jamestown.
Your mother?
Yes.
Jamestown?
Yep.
What were their interests? I know your dad was an organ player.
Well, Dad would practice on the organ. He was never really, really good, but it was a pastime for him. And he also loved to play golf, but then gave it up in about 1946, 47. And the boat. Of course, he loved our little boat. We used to come out here to Chautauqua Lake and go fishing a lot. And as a kid, when I got to be about 16, 17, we used to water ski. And found out I used to have a lot of friends on Sunday afternoon because all my buddies would say, Don, what are you doing this afternoon? And they would kind of hint, well, let's go water skiing. So we would go out water skiing on Chautauqua Lake. But Dad loved to fish as well, and he had a lot of interest.
After he sold the business, what did he do? Did he just retire?
Well, he moved to Florida and retired, traveled a lot, and then slowly became ill, and then passed away in 73.
And your mother passed away 2 years ago?
Yes, 3 years ago. And it was right before 9/11, and we were going to have a funeral just about that weekend, and then we postponed it for a year, and then we came back to Chautauqua, stayed at the Athenaeum here, and had a memorial service for Mom at the time. Brought in the relatives. There was about 50 of us from all over the country. Even relatives from Sweden came over, and we had a memorial for Mom.
So we had a chance to meet Shirley and you and your sister.
Well, Eleanor lived in Lincoln. She passed away. Actually, before Mom did, which was sad. And then Marilyn in Boston, who is a live wire. Very musical, and her son, John, is getting married the end of September, so we're all going to meet up in Manchester, New Hampshire for the wedding. In the meantime, I'm trying to get, just for the record, I'm trying to get Greg to rent us their house for a week next year so we can relive some of our memories about Dad and visit vicariously Robert Jackson.
That's terrific. Well, we'll have to, I think that's maybe a real possibility. Because Cindy and I talked about that on the record, about that, and we thought that was kind of a unique opportunity for everybody. So we'll keep the dialogue going here, because I'm intrigued by the whole concept, because I think it'd be great for you, and frankly an excuse for us to come up here, since we bought the place. And we have two places in essence on the lake, competing for the same period of time on the same lake, and it's always been kind of a juggling act for us.
Well, I think you have a nice life.
Yeah.
I know you have a very nice home, and nice surroundings. So.
Yeah. So this has been terrific.
Well, I wish I knew more about Robert Jackson, but I never met him. But my father knew him very well, and those are the stories that I know.